Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker and sponsor. I remember when this divisive concepts bill was discussed and talked about last year. I think it was my first day back here. And I have so many challenges with the definitions that are being used for what a divisive concept is. But for clarity and purposes here, the intent of your bill is that any public entity or institution would be liable to lawsuit, to challenge, and that the comptroller then needs to get a report about the divisive concepts or the individuals who are raising these objections in these institutions. To date, since we passed this legislation, do you know of a number? You had a number last time. Do you know of a number of cases that have come against our higher education institutions? I know so many professors and provosts are so worried about the chilling effect of terrible legislation like this. Do you know of how many cases have occurred thus far in the past 12 months?
Representative Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I perceive that there were multiple questions there. Could you break them apart for me and ask them one at a time?
Representative Pearson.
Sure. Thus far, do you know of any cases that have occurred at our higher education institutions related to the divisive concepts bill that was passed last year?
Representative Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As this bill is establishing a reporting mechanism which does not exist currently, it's impossible to know without this reporting mechanism, sir. The idea behind this bill is to have that tracking, to make it available to us so that we can have a feel for exactly what you're asking. At this point in time, I can't answer that with official data.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you for that answer and understanding the reporting aspect of this and how that could be helpful in answering the question. I do understand that intention of the legislation. Here is the problem that I have. The definitions that we are using for what is a divisive concept can be easily misconstrued. Conversations that need to happen in higher education, need to happen in this House, related to race, related to power, related to the lies of meritocracy, the realities of white supremacy, and how racism has impacted and influenced this country, this state, this institution are so important to be had, and legislation that further emboldens people to support this idea that these are divisive concepts or divisive concepts that we don't need to talk about is inherently harmful and divisive in and of itself. It ensures that we continue to perpetuate this world where there's some ahistorical existence that's going on, that we don't attach the realities, and I'll read it in here, related to individual sex and individual's race, because we don't want to talk about and have those very meaningful conversations. An individual, according to the legislation that was passed, that we now be getting a report on, if they feel discomfort or if they feel guilt or if they feel anguish because of conversations related to race or class or gender, they would be able to pull a report against their professor or against a government public entity employee, all because they're feeling discomfort about real conversations that need to happen in our state, especially in higher education, where we are teaching and training individuals to be members of our society. And so because this law emboldens a law that I believe is inherently not just divisive, but is racist and in its intention, I can't support this legislation, and I think we need to revisit these definitions of what is a divisive concept, because even some things that you might subjectively view as divisive doesn't mean they are unnecessary. And there are some things that are necessary that are difficult for some people to engage in, talking about race, talking about sexual orientation, talking about class, talking about white privilege, talking about white supremacy. These things are not easy topics, but they are necessary topics for people to understand how we got to the place where we are, where we even now have legislators passing laws and rather supporting laws that further prevent us from having these very meaningful conversations in our higher education institutions. institutions. And so for these reasons, I cannot support this legislation. I see Representative Johnson wants to say something too, so I'll end my time there. But the reality is, Representative, this type of legislation and the idea that there are divisive concepts, there are things beyond what we need to talk about when it comes to race and class and gender are wrong and immoral. And so I ask all my colleagues to not support this law or bill. Thank you.